So, what did your background in screenwriting, being an author and a professor, teach you about marketing?
So it's interesting because the thing that helped me the most for screenwriting and being a professor is also the thing that helped me the most with marketing, which is to realize that storytelling, which is at the base of all of those things, is actually the reason it's so powerful and people like it so much is because storytelling reflects the way that we as human beings think and remember. And so I think seeing that reflected helps people to remember things and to appreciate things more. I'll give you, for instance, if I was to ask you right now and you had no time to prepare, if I said, do you remember what you were doing December 23rd, 2021? You would maybe be able to think about it for a while. You could possibly come up with something. But if I said, hey, do you remember what you did the first Christmas of the pandemic? That completely changes your brain now, right? Because you're not looking to search for information that's in your head. You're looking for a specific memory that's a sort of probably a story, right? What did you do with your family when you had to social distance, or did you social distance, right? So all those things that suddenly become codified as an event in your life come flowing out. And you don't have to remember by days because you remember by what you experienced and how you felt.
That's such a great explanation of the power of storytelling, and I know we're really going to dig into this a lot because I'm very intrigued. Immediately when you were asking the question, my mind kind of went off in the distance. I was thinking of books, even business books that I've read. Like some of my favorites are from the storytelling perspective instead of just factual, do this. You know, that's a lot easier to recall. So I got to ask you, though, so from your background, right, how did you get in the legal space? How did you get into, marketing for law firms?
Well, as they always say, it's not about what you know, it's about who you know, right? And I was a professor at a couple of different colleges, and one of my friends had gone to college. He was teaching there, and he had gone to college with Andy Stickle, who at the time was, he was running Social Firestarter. This was before the merger and everything. And Andy had been telling his friend that I know, he said, I'm having a problem. I can get a lot of people who understand the tech aspects of what I'm asking them to do. I cannot teach them how to effectively convey an idea, tell a story, or elicit an emotion. That doesn't seem to be something that is easily teachable in the way that the technical aspects are. So I kind of got in backwards. I got in through the creative arena and then had to learn the technical aspects that went along with it. And in a way, I think it was incredibly beneficial both to the people I was helping, because that's not a skill set they often have, but it was also hugely helpful to me because I am now frequently one of the only people in the room that is ever looking at the equation from the philosophical and the ideological angle, as opposed to just the technical angle. Now, that's not the only thing you need, but it is a very important piece. And when that's missing, it makes it very hard to connect with people, I think, through your marketing if you don't have that.
And I couldn't agree more. I find that to be a big challenge myself, trying to market my own business. It's, I have the hard skills, the creative side is lacking. And what's really helped me is one of my first hires had the creative side. Mm-hmm. Had where I had my deficiencies, he could kind of look in the storytelling, and we could definitely do a much better job. Of course, I think there's always room to improve, but that was he was kind of the yin by yang. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about storytelling. It is a great way to convey the humanity of a brand for a firm or a solo attorney. What are the mechanics of getting to the story behind the brand?
Yeah, so this is tricky. And this is where I tend to run into, how they say, if someone is good enough at something, they're not always great at teaching it because they never had to learn the process themselves if they're a natural at something. And because I'm very good at coming up with ideas, it's sometimes difficult to explain the process. But I think part of the mechanics of getting to the story behind a brand is, and this is going to sound mean and it's not intended to, but frequently lawyers know what they want to do, but they don't know why they want to do it the way that they want, right? Meaning they have an instinctive understanding of what they want to accomplish, but they haven't necessarily interrogated, why is that? Why did I choose this practice area? Why did I choose to do it the way I'm doing it and not the way that other lawyers are doing it, right? Because the truth is, every choice that you make says something about who you are as an individual, as a brand, as a firm. But if you haven't interrogated internally why it is that you're doing it, it makes it super difficult to be able to communicate that to anybody else, right? So sometimes the level of introspection that you need to understand why you're making the decisions you're making is actually the most difficult, but also the most important piece. And that's the beginning of the mechanics is I need to understand. I know the what. I need to understand the why. If the lawyer can give me the why, then I can help them to translate it into that. But that's the key piece. That's like sort of the Rosetta Stone of all of your marketing is figuring out what is What is the why behind what I'm doing?
Yeah, so that like Simon Sinek, kind of circling back to Simon Sinek, start with why, and so you've written like 7 books on the mechanics of storytelling, and you even have a book dedicated to horror and all the subgenres of horror. So I think it's fair to say that you understand what the mechanics are to making a compelling story. So what makes a story good? Because when we hear it, but it's the structure of it. Like what makes a good story?
I think the first thing I'll say is a good story can have slightly different shapes depending on what medium it's coming to you in, right? Like something written in an email is not necessarily going to have the exact same shape as the way you would say something in a 30-second TikTok. But I think at its heart, the one thing that makes a story good is a sense of recognizable human behavior or recognizable human emotion, right? If you don't have that in there, then you've lost the plot, because then you're just your fingers crossed that people are going to be interested in the facts or statistics that you're presenting. And that's always a tough sell. If you've ever tried to ask anybody to pay attention to you while you're giving them numbers and schematics, there are certain kinds of people who that like their brains light up and they're excited. But for the large majority of the populace, that's distancing, right? What they want is something human to hang on to, something that they can latch onto and feel. I often describe the difference between a decent story and a great story is the difference between understanding something and feeling something. Like if I say to you, I'm tired, then you understand. But if I say to you, my eyes are bloodshot and I can barely keep them open and everything is blurry and I'm having trouble focusing, you feel that I'm tired now. You don't just understand, right? And so for me, that's the difference between what makes a story passable or interesting intellectually and what makes it good, because it's grabbed you.
So on that, and that's an amazing example of because I could feel that. Like I immediately felt tired just with you explaining that, right? And I'm back. We're having a great conversation here. Back to the starting with the why, and to try to create this story. I think many of the individuals listening are like, well, I want to make more money. I was doing immigration law or criminal defense, and it wasn't lucrative. So like a lot of the people that shift over to personal injury, it's yes, we want to do good for people, but a lot of them it's money motivated. So how do they convey, or do they just own it and say, hey, look, we're going to get you the most money and just own that type of story? Like where does an individual like that go where maybe it was money motivated?
Well, I still think, regardless of if you moved into the arena because you wanted to make more money than in another arena, when you got into it, your practice is in all likelihood not going to look exactly like everyone else's, which means certain choices that you made because of who you are. You made because of who you believe, right? There are some places where there are lawyers that want to be the biggest firm, right? They don't want to just practice in their city or their state. They want to be a national firm, right? There's a motivation underlying that. And whatever that is tells you something about yourself and your reasons for doing it, as opposed to if you are primarily sticking, let's say just in your state, or there's a specific kind of people that you're appealing to, right? Like sometimes people I want to go for the Hispanic community in California, right? Well, there's a reason that you chose that. And I doubt when you really dig down that every decision is just based on finances. Several of them are. We all work for a living to live, right? But we choose the specific thing we do to live because of something about us, something that matters to us, or honestly, sometimes something that we're not concerned about or something we're trying to avoid. So for the sake of argument, somebody might be building their firm to avoid being a certain kind of firm, right? And if that's the case, then what it means is I want to be the authentic me that's not that thing, right? That will help you to steer your branding or to steer your marketing, because it's probably something that turned you off or something that you didn't like that you saw another attorney doing. So guess what? You should lean into that, because if your instinct was you didn't like it and you want it to be a different way, then the clients that will appreciate that would be glad to hear that that's what you are, right? So for me, that's why the why is so important, because it also helps you to convey the why to someone else to whom it's going to matter,
Yeah, and that makes sense, and it will immediately appeal to those individuals, and it will completely shut you off to the others, and that's okay.
Yep. And
I think so many individuals want to be liked by everyone, but it's you aren't right for everyone in certain scenarios. So many trial attorneys are great at telling stories about others, right? convincing a jury, painting the whole picture. You've seen Mark Lanier as a master at this, but maybe they're not the best storytellers about themselves. So, what are some of the practical exercises, or prompts that someone can do to maybe get over the hump to try to create this story and try to start the process?
Yeah. Well, one thing I'll say that you pointed out, which I think is a fantastic place to start, is if you're objective enough to step back and see that you are a good storyteller about others, but not about yourself, that's not necessarily problematic for you, because if you're a good storyteller, sometimes you being able to tell someone else's story really well is as effective as you being able to tell your own. Meaning, if let's say you decide that I don't really like talking about myself that much, but I really have a passion for helping people, then guess what? All the stories of the people that you've helped, if you're good at telling those stories, that can become part of what your brand is, right? Is that you're the guy who cares about the little guy, and what you do is you tell the stories of the little guys. And let's say you're doing 2-minute videos that you put out on YouTube or on social media as ads, then you don't necessarily have to tell your story, because by telling the stories of other people that you've helped, you are helping them understand who you are, because you're the guy that worked with all these people, right? Because one of the things that's difficult to explain is it's very important for people to understand who you are without you spending too much time talking about yourself. It's a very delicate balance, because people on social media are fairly selfish. They want to know what you can do for them, right? So if you spend a lot of time discussing who I am and what my background is and how I did this and that, you will lose people because they can't invest in what you can do for them. But if you're telling yourself about them through what you've done for other people, that's a whole other story. They're paying attention because now that reflects on what you can do for them as well.
Part of where I was going to go next, but I think we already answered this. You answered this in a roundabout way. Was like, where should this story live? And website, social, but again, is this branding? Is this everyone's trying to be different and have this unique selling proposition. Is it maybe this introspection, like, this is who I am, I'm owning it, I'm creating my this following it? Is this what goes into, everyone talks about brand and they talk about it in this big broad context without any weight, but is this how you define brand with storytelling?
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, for me at least, about why it's important to find your central story is that your story is not necessarily your brand. Your story is who you are. Your brand is how you explain who you are to other people, right? Which is why people can organically evolve their brand over years. Nike hasn't been just do it forever. And sometimes they'll revisit it in campaigns. Sometimes they'll do other things. But the ethos of just do it has always been part of Nike, right? So the idea is the underlying structure of who you are, what the story of your firm or your company, that can be interpreted in many ways. The great thing about a story is that a good story can be adapted into multiple different formats and still be powerful. No better example of that than, a book that was turned into a play that they then made into a movie that was also a radio broadcast, right? So many good stories can just be converted to be used in different fashions. And I always say that what a brand is just the public perception that everyone has of what you are, right? So any opportunity that you have to grow that, whether it's a website, just a dedicated landing page, a 2-minute video, your TikTok feed, appearing on a radio show, all of those things add up together. And the reason why I think branding is important is because it used to be you could put one commercial on the Super Bowl, everybody saw it, they knew who you were, and your brand was done, right? Audiences now are so splintered that you have to appear in 30 or 40 different places. That's where it gets dangerous if you don't have a clear brand, because then some people who saw this thing think you're a certain kind of thing, and then they heard the radio, they think you're a different kind of thing. So the reason branding is important, honestly, is that it just helps to codify all of that stuff so that you're still the same person no matter where someone's seeing you.